And good morning. Welcome to all members and indeed officers for this morning's meeting of the Economy Overview and Scrutiny Panel. Agenda item 1 is apologies for absence and named substitutes. There are no apologies for absence because all 6 members who are appointed to the committee are here, and therefore there are no named substitutes. But I will, just as a matter of public record, say that following the last meeting I did write to the Leader of the Council to indicate to them that there were no less than 3 vacancies on this panel, all from her Reform Party administration. I haven't had a reply, in the pre-meet I did ask our committee officer to formally, and several of the members did comment that I would ask our committee officer to formally write to the Leader of the Council, express our extreme concern that we're now nearly 12 months into the municipal year and no appointment to those vacancies has been made. Councillor Bales.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, everybody. Just to put on the record, my official record, my complete disappointment on all of this. We've been here for over a year now, and we've had vacancies on here. And my residents have voted me on to represent them and to do the appropriate scrutiny of what's going on in the council. If the parties cannot get their act together to put people on here to represent their residents, then I think that's absolutely disgraceful. They're taking money off the taxpayers and not attending any meetings. So I think with our cabinet member for efficiency here, I think I could make some efficiency savings, and that's not pay the people who can't turn up at these meetings. Thank you.
Councillor Allen.
Yes, thank you, Chair, and good morning, everybody. Totally agree with everything you've just said, both of you. Could we write to the Leader and invite her to the next meeting to explain why we haven't got a full committee?
Happy to do that, yes. Good. Okay. Declarations of interest and of any party whip. No. Public participation, there isn't any. So without further ado, let's turn to the first substantive item on the agenda, which is item 4, the Worcestershire Growth Hub, and welcome to Gary and Luke for this item. Gary, I'll hand over to you.
Very quick intro from me before I hand over to Luke. So the Growth Hub is one of 41 growth hubs across the country, and Department for Business and Trade, so central government, do fund the Growth Hub, and it was in the settlement that they'll fund for the next 3 years, so that's worth noting. Also that there's a business growth service nationally that's being designed and implemented and kind of rolling out. But the Growth Hub is an important part of our economic strategy here in Worcestershire because it's that real business engagement tool, both reactive and proactive. I'll hand over to Luke to give a sort of summary of the paper, and then obviously we can move to questions. Luke.
Thanks, Gary. Yeah, good morning, everybody. My name's Luke Willits, responsible for the Growth Hub operation, among another few services within the kind of LEP responsibilities that transferred to the local authority in April 2024. So hopefully everyone's had a chance to read the report. My intention this morning is just to kind of give some headlines of kind of drawing from that report, and then happy obviously to take any questions that you may have. So in terms of just some background, growth hubs are a tool of government. They were established in 2014 with the intention of providing coordinated business support across England. They do benefit from receiving some central government funding, as Gary touched on there. The Department of Business and Trade are the sponsoring department, and there are 41 growth hubs across the country at the moment. And their intention really is to act as a local delivery arm of national business support, offering tailored advice and signposting predominantly to SMEs. So how do we deliver that? So delivery is aligned with our local economic strategy objectives. And as I mentioned, the responsibility is transferred to the county council as the accountable body, along with the LEP responsibilities in April 2024. During the last 3 years, the Growth Hub has benefited from additional local investment from our local government partners through the UK Shared Prosperity Funding programme. And what that additional investment has done really is enabled the Growth Hub to bolster its capacity and its capability and enhance the amount of business engagement that we've been able to do through building that account management capability. Unfortunately, as I'm sure you're aware, the UK Shared Prosperity Funding ceases at the end of this month. However, we've had a number of conversations with local government partners about future funding from April, and those have been positive, with agreement in principle for partners to continue their investment in the Growth Hub from April, which is really positive. Just touching on kind of achievements, the Growth Hub, just to give you an idea of scale, typically supports about 1,500 businesses per annum and will make over 4,000 referrals each year into business support offers. And those business support offers can be local, regional or national in their nature. Due to the nature of funding arrangements, success is measured in a number of different ways. So some are outputs based, where it's kind of number of non-financial assists. So for example, the number of businesses that we engage with and that we support. Some are outcomes based. So it might be things like jobs created or new technologies or services that have been adopted by a business to improve their productivity. There's been some local flavour that's been applied to those outcomes based on the funding agreements that we've made between the Growth Hub and local government partners and their specific local priorities as well in terms of their economic focus. I'm proud to say that the Growth Hub has delivered a really strong track record over that period and has either met or exceeded the vast majority of the UK SPF targets that we've had as part of our funding agreements. The report that's been shared also kind of lists a range of achievements across various other areas, which I won't go into now because it would take too long, but that's a nice problem to have, but hopefully does demonstrate the breadth of the activity that's been undertaken by the team to provide business support across the county. And just to kind of wrap up the summary, Chair, if I may, just to kind of touch on moving forward. So subject to securing the investment from our partners, we plan for continuous improvement, as you'd expect, and to kind of enrich the Growth Hub proposition even further. And that includes making some improvements to the website, making it easier and clearer to navigate for our businesses, enhancing our professional business advisors program that provides expert local advice across a range of key business topics, improving awareness and access to information about finance mechanisms for our businesses, delivering a curated business event schedule which responds to the topics that matter most to our businesses, and of course doing the delivery and integration with those national priorities and initiatives that come from government in terms of, as Gary touched on earlier, things like the Business Growth Service and the industrial strategy. So I'll wrap it up there if I may. Hopefully that provides a useful overview, and happy to pan back.
Thank you, Gary. And Luke, so I'll open it up to questions. So who'd like to go first? Councillor Birch.
Thank you very much, Chairman, and good morning. The Growth Hub certainly do a very important role and do a lot of good work. And I know from our experience at a district level, whenever I've had issues with businesses needing additional support or advice, it tends to be the first port of call. But with the changes now to funding, I'm aware that a number of, and in the pre-meet we had the conversation about which of our district colleagues are still offering support and are still willing to provide the funding that they have been through UK SPF. But are there due to be funding challenges this year? Is that an offer that all the district councils have now made, or is it likely that the funding will now be reduced compared to what it has been for the last year or two?
Thank you. So there's two parts to that question, if I may. So just from a national point of view, for the first time in probably the best part of a decade, we've now got a multi-year funding settlement from government. So for the next 3 years, we now have a commitment to the Growth Hub, which is great and helps with that kind of slightly longer term planning and gives some consistency there. And there was a slight uptick in terms of the quantum of funding as well. So round figures, 315,000 this year, 330,000 next year. So a slight uptick. But doesn't cover the shortfall that we saw from the loss of UK SPF. I'm pleased to say that the conversations with district partners, all 6 have given agreement in principle to continuing to fund the growth hub to at least the same level that we've got this year. So we should see a maintenance of the level of service, if not an improvement moving forward.
Good, that's pleasing to hear. Good. Councillor Amar.
I'd just like to follow up on that commitment in principle. So how much is the commitment in principle I'm very interested in Bromsgrove, for example.
So we've asked for £70,000 per annum from each district council, and as I say, the agreement in principle is there. The next step now is getting that formalised through a funding agreement, and as I touched on in my kind of overview, each of the districts will have a slightly different focus in terms of the business engagement they would like to see in their respective areas. So some might like to dial it up around a particular sector, some around a particular size of business perhaps. So it's that detail that we're working through at the moment before we get that formalised.
Councillor Birch.
Thank you. Just a very short supplementary, and I think you've alluded to it, but just so it's categorical, have all district councils committed to that funding now? Is that agreed? Or is every one of the 6 districts contributing?
All of the 6 districts are contributing. There's the detail to work out in terms of the level, but I am pulling together a budget report that will go to the LEP board that will give full transparency and openness to those levels across the board.
Councillor Allen.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Thank you for your report. I'm perhaps asking you to look a little bit into a crystal ball. So the district councils are all indicating they're going to give you support, but obviously in just over 2 years they're going to cease to exist. We're either going to have 1 or 2 unitary councils. Has any work been started on looking ahead to when that point happens?
The challenge at the moment has been securing the service for as far as we can see in terms of the next 2 years, recognising local government reorganisation is happening. What I would say is that we're already seeing a challenge in terms of the way that national policy is playing out to a certain extent. So we are in a non-devo geography, as everyone's aware, and therefore we are getting less access to funding and powers that those devolution geographies have. What that kind of translates to is a lesser business support offer, because local partners don't have as much resource to be able to kind of supplement what business support is out there, and therefore until we know what the direction of travel is around LGR, it's difficult to be able to kind of design a service until we know that point. What I would say is that maintaining the level that we've got is crucial, because having that business intelligence that we glean at the moment every day is going to stand the next unitary authority / authorities, whichever way it goes, and the subsequent mayoral combined authority arrangements to have really strong intelligence to be able to design services and make sound decisions in terms of investments and policy decisions.
And just to the chair, yeah, I'd echo that. And indeed, in the pre-meet, we were talking about Worcestershire effectively being in a bit of a limbo. We're not in a strategic authority. We're not in a mayoral strategic authority. UK shared prosperity funding ends in about 18 days' time, and there is no more. So there kind of is a sense, and I see this as a county councillor, but also as a district leader, a vacuum as to where we're going to get our huge pockets of cash from to be able to do what we've done previously. And it's certainly something that we need to be very alive to.
I'd probably add, so we had a cliff edge at the end of UK SPF, all with the support of our district partners and the county and the LEP, all put in their resources, which is reserves back in. Then actually we've moved the cliff edge to 2028. The government settlement goes to 29. So I suppose the reality is we would then have to shape the service inside that budget, assuming there's no more money beyond 28. So I suppose that's the stark reality of where we are. It's good news that we've moved the cliff edge, but that's all we've done. to a point of where we've got as much certainty, and all of us in this room have got much certainty around unitaries, government and strategic authorities.
Because if we could predict the future, we'd be predicting the winner in the Gold Cup this afternoon, wouldn't we? So, Councillor Amar.
Thank you, Chair. On page 3, you said that there were 83 visits to foreign direct investment strategic businesses. Can you tell me more about those visits? And the foreign direct investment, I suspect that's coming from, obviously, internationally. Which countries, what type of companies? Just a little bit more about that, please.
So the foreign-owned business engagement has been supported through an additional contract through the Department for Business and Trade for the last few years. So previously that was through an arrangement called the Key Account Management Programme. This year, in 25-26, it kind of had a bit of a change at a national level and was called the Strategic Engagement and Investment Framework Programme. Bit of a mouthful. But the intention of it was government obviously were keen to understand what the status of foreign-owned businesses is across the UK. So from a UKL PLC point of view, are those businesses happy where they are? Are they looking to invest, consolidate where they are and invest further and expand their operations within the UK? Are they looking to offshore and go back and divest from the UK? So it's about kind of gleaning that intelligence from a national point of view. What we do at a local level is try and plug them into the local ecosystem as well as much as possible so that they get access to the same support opportunities as indigenous businesses within the UK as well. Well, and we kind of monitor that, report that as we're expected through that contract with government. We do a range of visits across the FDI, so there's an account portfolio of businesses that we manage regularly, and we provide that information back and we support those businesses and they're part of the local network. Unfortunately, one of the things I alluded to in previous response about government policy, the Strategic Engagement and Investment Framework Programme that was kind of coined as a bit of a pilot this year is going to continue next year, but sadly not in non-Devo geographies. So that was worth approximately an extra 60,000 per annum, give or take, and we won't have access to that next financial year.
What's Devo geography?
So the devolution geography, sorry, apologies.
Okay, sorry. So the 83 visits were in Worcestershire?
Yes.
Okay, and how many foreign-owned businesses do we have in Worcestershire?
Say again, sorry. Yeah. I'll give you the exact numbers. We're managing a portfolio of about 40. But our top 11 countries in terms of number of businesses that are foreign owned, United States is the top, so we've got 78 US owned businesses within the county. Germany is next at 49. Luxembourg comes in at third at 36, and we've got data on more which I'm happy to share with the panel separately.
Okay, thank you. Possibly something for a future panel. Thank you.
Good. Any other? Councillor Bowles.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks for the report. It's always interesting, and being new to the council, it's nice to see what's going on and how we're helping businesses. I've got two questions and then a comment which we can think about to take forward. Question is, and it's relating to what Councillor Birch and Amar have been saying about how we're getting the monies in to bridge this funding. At point 17, it's got, unfortunately, the allocation does not bridge the shortfall in funding from the UK SPF, and we're looking to the districts to bridge that gap. How are we going to be short on that, do you think? And if we are, what do we need to be doing about it? Are we confident that we can get the monies in to bridge that? That's the first question. And the second question is relating certainly through to the end where 27, 28, just more about AI and what are we doing to support the businesses to make them more efficient by using AI? That's the second question. Then the final comment is, and I hope we can take this forward, is that throughout looking back, we go through what our performance metrics are, which are great. They're nice and verbal and, you know, nice and what I'd call waffle. But what from that are the successful outcomes which we can take forward? It's nice seeing the metrics. And also, what are the unsuccessful bits which we've gone forward? So have we got lessons learned? So going forward, which Councillor Allen said, how can we improve ourselves? And there's obviously efficiency to be had. So we know we're doing it right. So it's really getting some flesh on what are the successful outcomes from those metrics. How can we go forward, lessons learned, etc. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. So the first question was about bridging the finance gap. That comes back to the conversation that we're taking with the districts at the moment. If we get the funding that we've asked for from the districts, that will bridge the shortfall and will sustain the level that we've been operating at. And I'm hopeful and confident that we'll be able to achieve that. So that's the first point. In terms of the AI piece, what we do as a growth hub is that we have capacity within the operational budget to deliver events and support to our businesses. And using the intel that we glean from the visits, the very many visits that we have, we will capture topics and then put on events that respond to those. Now, alongside that, we've also got, as part of the LEP arrangements, something called Beta Den, which is our technology accelerator programme, and delivers support to entrepreneurs and businesses within the county looking to innovate with their kind of technology projects. We've got a workshops programme as part of that offer as well, and that picks up at AI very much so, and has been really well responded to in terms of numbers that have engaged in that so far. So we intend to kind of continue that, and we'll continue to respond to the kind of business needs and demands based on the intel that we pick up, you know, through our engagement over the next 2 years. So very much part of the plans. In terms of the metrics and stuff, so yeah, I think one of the challenges we've got, because, you know, we've got a number of funding streams to make the service work. With it comes a number of reporting burdens, I would say. So, you know, we get that. That's just the way it works. People put in money and they want to make sure they know what they're getting for that money. So I understand that. So that's why we do a bit of the metrics bit, because we're kind of saying, look, you've given us X amount to do this, and we've delivered Y, and we've hit our targets on that. One of the things that we see, the Growth Hub is one of the service areas of the kind of wider LEP umbrella, if you like, and we measure kind of economic performance at that macro level around what is the impact of what we're doing having on the GVA of the county, what is it having on the overall jobs targets within the county as well. So we're tracking those at a macro level and looking and constantly looking at, is what we're doing having an impact, and is it shifting the dial on some of those things? One of the things I reached for a moment ago, and I was asked about the FDI question. We've just recently, in the last week, published our annual economy report update, which we've got the plan for growth, which is our county-wide economic strategy, which is marshalled around kind of 5 pillars of productivity, really. So infrastructure, skills, innovation, place, and what we do here is there are a number of KPIs that we track against all of those areas and make sure that what we're doing is having some meaningful impact. That's not to say the LEP is the only, you know, thing that has an impact on these, but it's kind of, are they moving in the right direction, and where do we need to kind of intervene really with the resources that we have?
A follow on, if I may. Thank you for that. It's interesting and I like the answers. So just going on about that, I mean, clearly we're here as our district councillors. what can we do? And I think those metrics and the outcomes from it, the successful ones, are all important. So what can we do as councillors here to help you get that funding which you require from the districts? I think, we're here obviously to help. So, if we've got that information, then we can drive it through our own district councils to do that. Where obviously I wear two hats, but we can start doing that for you. So, it'd be nice to get that through to us so we could help you make sure we get that funding. Thank you.
Yeah, that's very welcome, and I appreciate that. And a note from the panel and respectively going back to your own organisations and kind of making that case on our behalf would be very welcome. I think the other thing that would be great is one of the things that districts are rightly challenging us on as well is in terms of looking forward, making sure that more new businesses are benefiting from the service as well. So it's not the same group of businesses that are benefiting from the support. So again, in terms of your own networks, raising awareness about the Growth Hub and what it can do and what it's there for would be really valuable and welcome as well.
But I think that comes back to one of my questions later on in the panel, which is all the information we're being given. I noticed that certainly in one of the districts, which happens to be my district, that the startups coming up to 5 years has drastically dropped. We can keep businesses for a few years, but we suddenly drop as soon as we come to 5 years. And I think it's help from this part of the item agenda to help us make sure that we can keep the businesses longer than 4 years in our district. So, I'd welcome that and welcome a lot of help, and I think we'd like that, wouldn't we, Councillor Amar? Absolutely. So thank you for that. So I'm trying to join it together for us, Chair.
I think, Gary.
I think there was also part of the question of looking forward. Obviously, UKS provided us with grant money and a variety of national funds was grant money to deliver locally. I think what we have started to see is that because of that non-devolved piece, that actually we haven't got access to that and access to the UK SBF. So we have started changing, I suppose, our offer to more an information, advice and guidance one at whatever level of business, so whether that's startup, whether that's 3 years or whether that's more mature. And that's then seen other offers start to come to play, so business angels, access to finance. So we are, the offer to businesses locally is changing the way that it's doing back to fitting it within the resource that we've got. So I think that there's a bit of a forward look in terms of direction of travel here. We see ourselves very much as imparting the advice for businesses to adopt and change. However, probably that carrot of the grant is going to disappear, I suspect, in terms of where the amount of money coming from either volume or local partners. So we already know we're starting to move and change the offer and the way it's going.
Councillor Edmonds, did you want to come in?
Well, thank you for the report, and I think it carries on from what Gary's just said, actually, strangely enough. Basically, on page 6 at point 23, we talk about other income streams now. We're obviously in a situation where we don't know the future, Cheltenham Cup notwithstanding. It's a time probably to look inward and perhaps change from being the hunter for funds to a farmer of things that we can create ourselves and be our own master. This is a difficult situation. Councils aren't really in this normally, but I think that's where we are. And obviously the point there is made that you're still to be determined. So what work's being done at the moment on increasing or looking at potential revenue streams that we may be able to build to fill the gaps in funding that we're experiencing?
Thank you. So yeah, one of the streams, as I've mentioned a number of times, is districts and supporting us that way. What we're seeing is a number of national funding opportunities coming up on a competitive basis as well. So the reference that's made in the paragraph you've just mentioned there, Councillor, is the Local Innovation Partnership Fund, which is a competition being run by UKRI, UK Research and Innovation. Again, this is a similar situation where the local innovation partnership fund, some allocations have been made to mayoral combined authorities, and they've had an earmarked allocation, and others are having to bid for it on a competitive basis, which is what we've done. We are monitoring those on a regular basis, checking the landscape, recognising that the industrial strategy is slowly starting to bring out more opportunities like this, monitoring those and mapping them and making sure that where they align with our local economic objectives, we are putting in bids and developing teams to put bids in there to try and win some of that stuff. We've had success in the past, and that was how we were able to expand the Beta offer from having simply an accelerator to an incubator as well. Won some funding through Eagle Labs on that. We've got some funding from the British Business Bank last year to support with the development of a new angel network, which we launched at the end of last year, which sees kind of local high net worth individuals investing their own private wealth into local companies to help them scale and grow. So we're doing a number of things to try and augment what we've got public sector as well.
Okay.
Good.
Okay, just following on from that then, just moving ahead really. So one of the things that I found when in business was that obviously things do change, because without saying really, but as a council, we provide a service, yeah? Now, some of those services I think have got, they have all got value, but I think as we move on, we could probably start to create a real value that firms would come to us and purchase services from us. There's a lot of experience in the council, certainly in this area, and it may be, although it's a bit different for us to put that different hat on, maybe that's the hat we should be wearing and starting to say, well, we can provide these services outside of the normal remit. We're in different times and we can compete there. The thing is, we are moving then into a competitive zone. I totally agree with you there. Okay.
So if I just start with the response to that, so I absolutely agree, and we see some growth hub arrangements have started to do that commercial bit. It's a tricky one because when you look at the government funding that's provided, it's very much this is free to all, free access to all at point of delivery, and there has to be a real clear line of separation between the activities you're doing with that funding and not generating a return. That's not to say it can't be done, because there are some arrangements elsewhere that do that, but there is a very clear line in terms of what's done, and that would require capacity and time to kind of think about what are those service offerings that we could offer. But yeah, it's certainly something we could consider.
Well, thank you for that reply. It's very frank and candid. I didn't expect you to say anything else, really. I think we're being put in this position now. We've already said there's a lot of unknowns to us. We've already had income streams refused to us now because we're not in a certain state. So we don't know what that holds for us, even with Unitary coming along and what forth. So really, we're having to change our approach. So thanks for that. I do appreciate it. Okay.
Good. Any other comments? Or Councillor Marr?
Loads, actually. So on page 4, you talk about the training courses that are provided by the hub. One of the comments that I keep getting is that people who are in full-time job, who want to start a business on the side, like a sidekick, can't actually access the skills and knowledge of what it takes. So I am wondering if the hub does do sort of evening teams sort of trainings on how to start a business. And if not, could it be packaged to do that? They're very expensive in the outside world. And as Councillor Edmonds was talking about, if it's something that's subsidised or done freely, maybe people will be more enthused, especially about how not to get in trouble. One resident told me that one of the things that put him off was getting in trouble with tax returns, and because it's the start of a business, he didn't really want to pay an accountant, and it's sort of like all these hurdles, access to markets, even though you might have a brilliant idea, be very good at something, but you're put off.
Thank you. So the Growth Hub its delivery hours are, you know, you kind of 9 to 5, if you like, in terms of that business engagement piece. The support offer that kind of we refer into picks up a range of kind of local, regional and national pieces, and some of those will go into kind of evening spots, and we will run events on an evening at times, depending on what it is that we're dealing with. But yeah, we could look at that. I know the Business Growth Service is looking at kind of doing some more in that space as well. We can certainly consider that.
Okay. I think it would be really, really good, because I did a program once for something else, and it took 6 months, and it was once a week for 2 hours after work, and it really did upskill me. It wasn't intense. It was something that you could fit around your life. I do have another question on page 6. Point 23, cluster management to key sectors is aligned to the LEP's Local Innovation Partnership Fund. What are the key sectors, and what does cluster management exactly mean, please?
So, as I've mentioned earlier, the delivery is aligned to the Worcestershire Plan for Growth, the economic strategy for the county. And in there, we've identified 3 what we call growth sectors and 3 cornerstone sectors. So the growth sectors are around cyber, IT defence, advanced manufacturing and agri-tech. See those as having the potential to add kind of GVA if they were able to grow to the local economy. But the LEP board rightly challenged and said, okay, we need to make sure that we're picking sectors that have got high volumes of employment too. So those are what we call the cornerstone sectors, and we have 3 of those: health and care, construction, and business and professional services. So those are the kind of 6, split 3 and 3 in terms of growth and cornerstone sectors that we'll support all sectors, recognising the business base of Worcestershire, but in terms of the strategy, those are the ones that have been outlined. And then your second question was...
what cluster management?
Cluster management. Yeah, so government will talk about SIC codes and how you categorise sectors. And you might say, you know, manufacturing is a sector, but manufacturing will require other sectors to make it work in terms of logistics, you know, academia in terms of training. Okay. And so that's the cluster that supports that wider economic activity, if you like. So it's all of the bits that make it work. Sometimes we talk about triple helix as well, in terms of academia, industry and local government coming together on shared priorities. But that cluster bit is about those bits that make a part of the economy work.
Okay, so I suppose you have very good connections with the University of Worcester and
we do,
colleges.
yes. So we've got good connections with the business school at the University of Worcester. They sit on our innovation board, a sub-board. They were really instrumental in helping us with the Local Innovation Partnerships Fund bid that we submitted to the UKRI last month. Darren, my colleague behind, who's the Growth Hub manager, sits on the Business Advisory Board of the business school as well. So yeah, we've got good links and understand their offer as well, because in the last couple of years they've had access to the Help to Grow national programme to support business leaders and managers with developing their skill set. So yeah, that's a strong relationship.
So when I visited CTEC, one of the difficulties they were facing with apprenticeships is actually the construction sector. They couldn't, they found it difficult to get young people into becoming apprentices in, you know, to become plumber, plasterer, etc. Is this something that, since that's a cornerstone industry, is this something that the council, the hub or the council can step into to support that, because they are facing those difficulties?
I may defer to Gary on the skills bit in a moment, but what I would say on that is that, you know, in the past, where the LEP has had access to capital funds from government, we have used those to support those industries. So the LEP made investment into Kidderminster College, and the Green Technology Centre that's now been established there. But having been and visited that recently since it's been operational, it's been a great success, but it's already kind of topping out in terms of capacity because there is that much demand for those sectors. So they've got great kind of, cutting edge assets there in terms of as a teaching facility, but demand is outweighing supply in effect.
All right, thank you.
Good. Councillor Allen, were you indicating, or was I? Yeah, I thought you were.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just to take up on Councillor Marr's remarks you made earlier, which I agree with, it's really just to really briefly tell you how I started my business and how I think it was the County Council, not Worcester City Council, that helped me. In the 90s, I started my company Faithful Alarms, which I've now sold, so there's no conflict talking about it now, I think. And one of the things I did was went on a business link course. Yeah, you're nodding your head, Gary. Yeah, it was absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, that would be it.
And it was a week's course for people who'd never run a business before, covering everything from sales, processing, etc., to finance, tax returns, and finding accountants and everything else. And I think, if I remember rightly, we got 300 or 500 pounds if we completed all 5 days. And we were able to keep going back and asking questions over the following year as we got stuck. And it was brilliant. And it meant at the end that I started from a one-man band to running the largest fire and intruder alarm company in Worcester City, and employing, over the years, many people and bringing, thousands and thousands of pounds worth of work into the city. So my plea is, if we don't still do it, which I think we don't really do anymore, is that we start looking again at taking people. You're going to have a high drop-off rate because it's not for everybody. Running your own business is incredibly hard. It's a 24-hour day job, 365 days a year. But from these little acorns, you end up getting people trained. I put people through apprenticeships, and we provided a valuable service to the people of Worcestershire. So anyway, that's all we are. Thank you.
Councillor Allen, we're pleased to know we still run the course. It's not quite 5 days, and it hasn't got that level of grant at the back end of it, which is a bit of a shame. But nevertheless, that sort of startup course is still available and runs in various locations across the county. We also do business coaching, so also if you do the first bit and you sort of get to that point where you go, okay, now I've got a challenge because the business has moved on, I've started, it's got some revenue, we offer 10 hours of business coaching. So it's back to that thing I was saying around the grant money might not be flowing like it was in Business Links days, but the information, advice and guidance is hopefully more valuable than the £500 that we deliver. And then we support businesses at a higher level with professional business advice. So the offer that we put together, and there could be a question here that says, well, you've gone to the districts for the money, what's the county doing? The county, with its resources, is keeping those bits of the offer going. So that the Growth Hub have got focus on the engagement. They've also got something to talk to, whether it's startup stage, growing in the early stages, or established. And I suppose the other change that's happened is that push and pull, where we were taking people in and they were, we were kind of encouraging all that. Now we're also talking to them about apprentices, taking on young people, which given the current climate is quite tough. Or equally, how are they thinking about their environment sustainability, all those kind of things we're bringing into the offer and trying to put those in front. And probably from this year, the advisors, the engagers, who go out, they will also be talking about the health needs of their workforce. So we're now using it as a kind of push-pull to push some of the agendas of local government and some of the things that we need to see in terms of healthy workforce, healthier population. And I suppose there's a shift in terms of where the Growth Hub was about business support, business advice. It's now attaching other agendas to its bow, I suppose, in terms of where it's going forward.
Lovely, thank you. If I briefly just come back and say thank you for that. I'm glad to hear it's still going. It's a shame about the money because, a a week when you're starting your own business and there's no money coming for that week makes it very difficult. The other thing Business Link did was that when you took on your first employee, if they stayed with you for a year, you got £1,000. And considering the hike in national insurance and everything, I think that's something that should, if possibly, be looked at going forward because, you know, we need to encourage people to employ people. Thank you.
Gary, probably the final word.
I think if we had the money, we'd continue to do it. That would be my view, because it encourages those people to start up and get going. The more of them that have got a plan is helpful, because we do straw polls at our events, and it's amazing the numbers who've not got a business plan, and you think, how are you running a business? So the more we can implement that good practice, the better. But yes, who knows in the future, if more money flows, then we can look to bring some of these things back, because there's some of the best ideas and some of the best support programs are the ones that's already been delivered, so you can reignite them.
Good. Okay. Well, if there's no other comments or questions, then we will conclude the discussion on the Growth Hub. Just by way of conclusion, we've considered the information provided within the report, had a good discussion and an airing. Is there anything further on this topic that we want to bring back to a future meeting for scrutiny, or anything that we specifically want to highlight to Councillor Amos? Councillor Marr.
Yeah, I'm more interested in looking into the FDI and how we could help increase it, and also that training that we spoke about, is there something that's going to be created online for people? So sort of like really focus on startups and how we can help them.
Okay, fine. Gary, will you take those 2 points away, and we can come back at a future meeting?
Yep, happy to take those two away.
Thank you. If the panel's happy with that, and those proposals by Councillor Marr, that brings this agenda item to an end. Gary, thank you. I know you're staying for the next item. Thank you. Luke, I'm not sure whether you're staying or you're going to take your leave. That's that's fine. And thank you to your colleague at the back from Worcestershire, whose name I forgot. Thank you. Who's come along. So thank you. Right. Okay. We'll move on to our second substantive item, which is the Worcester 6 Business Park. And obviously we have Gary here for this, and welcome to Scott Riddell, who's the Senior Project Manager, Growth and Investment. So again, I'll hand over to Gary, who'll probably be the warm-up act, unless Scott's going to jump straight in. Scott's going to jump straight in. Scott, over to you.
Straight over to me. Thanks, Gary. Thanks, Chair. I hope this paper provides panel with what they need to understand the history and the background of the site, but also to give an insight onto how this development has become an important employment site for Worcestershire and how it reflects the wider economic ambitions of the county. The report goes on to detail key milestones in the site's history, current occupiers on the site, and the crucial partnership and governance arrangements that have made this scheme so successful. And the park has been a major success. It's driven economic growth in the area. There's now been over £300 million of private sector investment with 1.2 million square foot of development. As you would expect, on a project this large, there have been several lessons that have been learned along the way, and for balance, these have been included in a section at the end of the report. And our thanks to colleagues both at Wychavon District Council and at Stowford, the developer, for their valuable and honest insights into what these are. And finally, as way of wrapping up, I think it's important to say that the site is by no means finished. There are still plots available for development. The project team continue to come up with initiatives to market these plots, and panel members may have seen in the press this week that a planning application has been submitted for a number of smaller units to be developed on one of the vacant plots as an answer to market demand. So things continue to move along and move forward. So I hope members have had a chance to read the report. Gary and I are happy to answer any questions or respond to any comments. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Scott. I'll look to colleagues. No one's jumped their hand up straight away, so I'll perhaps use Chair's prerogative, because, Scott, I was around in the Cabinet back in 2011 when this was kicked off effectively. And I think this is a very honest appraisal, because if I had one reflection, it's about the jobs that have been created, and the you know, the aspiration was 5,000 and it's between 800 to 1,000. And some of my previous cabinet colleagues over the years would have commented that we didn't perhaps get, I don't use the phrase the right type of businesses there, but the type of businesses that were employing large numbers of skilled people to drive up the average wage, etc., and the GVA effectively. And there was a sense that actually some of the units have been more warehousing and storage. And I think one of the carpet factories from Kidderminster, for example, store there. But to me, that's to be overly critical, and I wouldn't downplay the the GVA overall, the business rate income that will have generated for Wychavon. I'm only jealous because it's not in Wyre Forest, and and indeed the wider county. And the job creation there. And I think the reflection in the report is very fair about being realistic in terms of actually being more trying to pinpoint with greater clarity as to the scale and the amount of jobs that would be created. But I think it's a very good success story, and certainly, having driven to County Hall for the last decade, to see it be constructed from completion to what is there now is really good. And it's a good example of county, district council, landowner, in terms of especially Stowford, the developer, but importantly, the return on investment for the effectively here as a county taxpayer. I think it's a really good success. And if we can't construct these type of business parks here, right on the edge of the motorway, then where can you really? Now that's prompted Councillor. After that little monologue from the chairman, I'll hand over to Councillor Burt.
You've inspired me, Chairman. It is absolutely, Worcestershire has been a massive success. It's, brought in, it's incredibly impressive. I said in the pre-meet that we've been able to fill so many of the units, the amount of industrial estates and business estates across the country that are partially empty, and we've managed to fill it with some incredibly big businesses like MyTech, huge global businesses that have came into Worcestershire. As we know, business confidence is down. I think I read the story this morning that the market has collapsed by about £1 trillion in the last week in terms overall globally. But still, we've got clear business confidence in Worcestershire, and people are continuing to invest and move into the area. My question is more around how we continue to grow build on that and grow. Sadly, the cabinet member doesn't seem to enjoy coming to these meetings. So, Nick, if you can take this back to Mr. Amos and ask that we look into this in the future. And if he wants to come, he's more than welcome to. But my point would be around Parkway, and with the expansion of Junction 7, is how we can almost recreate this and use that expansion up at Parkway to continue to grow what we've seen happen. One junction down the motorway at Junction 6. We've got the opportunity there with the infrastructure. If anything, the infrastructure there will be more sustainable for people travelling in for work on public transport networks, closer to residential estates. So there should be an opportunity there to recreate something. We've seen a huge return on investment with this. It clearly works. We've been able to demonstrate that. To me, there is an opportunity there to do more, to make use of the M5, possibly make it the business motorway of the country. But whether there is anything we can do with Parkway to continue this expansion further up the M5.
Okay, heads or tails between us. This was one of 4 game changer sites, and I suppose from a public sector point of view, we haven't got land ownership here, but what we have got is we have invested to enable the site to happen. That's quite a trick, and I think probably one of the things that I've reflected on from this report is how do we replicate that across maybe our other motorway junctions, or equally down into obviously Junction 7 and obviously into Wychavon town. I think that is a challenge, given that the planning system is a kind of a bit of a blunt tool, really. That all the agents work with John Dillon to create an annual report, and it's quite a good read because, as we know, Worcestershire, each market and each geography is slightly different. and hence probably, again, that reflection on the job numbers. What we've been able to do is we've been able to kind of work with the developer and the landowner to get the sort of businesses we want. I think the challenge on 7 and probably beyond is we've only really got the planning system to help us kind of influence that. So from the outside, the buildings will probably look the same, but actually that density of job is the real challenge, I think. Many of the businesses that are listed and on the top of page 11, they are headquarters, or so even where, with my kind of economics hat on, go, oh, I don't really like logistics because that's big space, few jobs, not very well paid. What we've actually managed to create here is the big space, but actually the headquarters, those kind of HR, finance, and those kind of jobs around the business, which mean actually it creates as much volume as we could have and as much volume as where we are. We've not got that role further in and further on other sites. So I think it is something for us to reflect on in terms of perhaps Councillor Marr's piece that we've taken away in terms of how we're attracting investment and how we're getting that kind of headquarter operator here is, I think, our challenge as we move forward in terms of the economic strategy of Worcestershire.
Thanks, Gary. Dan, Councillor Birch.
Small supplementary then. How involved have your team been then with the, well, what is now Wychavon Town and the developments over there? And how much pressure are you putting on with the planning department at Wychavon to ensure that the business needs of the county are fully taken into consideration? Do you feel that you've been able to have your fair say? Do you believe that we will be able to achieve what your team would ideally like to see us achieve, or is there anything more that we can do in partnership with Wychavon to ensure that we are putting business at the forefront of this future development?
We've got an excellent working relationship with Wychavon and how we work sort of hand in glove in terms of any employment land, whether it is Wychavon Town or other sites, and that pretty applies to all the other districts as well. I think we've probably got the same challenge to think about, actually, is it just the size of the unit or what we want in terms of there, but equally, are we in a position to turn some of the things away with the powers that we've got? Probably not. So I think we're happy with the dialogue that we've got between county and district. It works well, particularly Wychavon, but I could point to other examples around the county. And therefore, I think at this stage and the stage of development, we've got about as much leaning in as we can. I think what we've managed to also convince is the developer, so that planning application for smaller units, the John Dillon report really does point towards this, that says, unsurprisingly, our Worcestershire business base is smaller companies with employees below 9, therefore they don't need huge amounts of space. And actually we've been out to see a few other developers who were actually developing that small space. So I think the more we can do to encourage those smaller units, because those are the ladder towards what Councillor Allen was referring to. They start up, they're in a small space, they're even working from home, suddenly they get a small unit, then they go on, they need a bigger unit. The next thing they know, 10, 15 years later, they're talking to us about a large unit on the edge of the motorway. So how we grow those own companies, and there were examples in that list, I think is an important factor of that property kind of ladder, and we often refer to that in housing, but actually there's a commercial one around the size of units and making sure we've got the spread. So good working relationship, and I think the more we can encourage people to kind of invest and put those smaller units in, the more that helps our economy.
I think just to add to that point, if I may, Chair, and to Councillor Birch, both Ian Edwards and Sean Riley, Head of Economic Development at Wychavon, sit on Worcester 6 board, and Sean attends the marketing meetings that I mentioned in my report with myself. So if there are any blockers for planning, we've got it sort of straight away that we can do something about that, and they've been on board since the start.
Councillor Edmonds.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just looking at this and making some observations, one of the things that you did say on page 13, the replication of the agreement, which I think Gary may have been alluding to there, is to get the buy-in really from the public sector in respect to these developments, and you're saying that that's a problem. in terms of in terms of moving this. Could I also ask, in terms of where we're looking at, broadband seems to be, or comms is the biggest tick in a box for any business today. And these developments, one of the issues that you put down is power. So are we making sure now for the future that these prerequisites need to be in place?
Okay. So I think the bit I alluded to was replicating this is very difficult because if you've got a private landowner with a private developer, they're happy to take, and obviously they'll do that on a risk and they'll make sure that they're making their margins. Yes, you can get the public sector involved, but suddenly are those margins different? If you're a private sector with your own money, why do you want the public sector telling you what to do? So this site is a bit unique in that sense of, unless as a public sector we're willing to bring money to the table, that might be difficult given our kind of financial challenges across the county, but also a developer and a private landowner might also say, well, why do I need you in? I want to take the full profit margin that I can. So it is a bit unique in that sense, and how we develop it, again, I think is how we replicate it is quite a challenge, which is what I was pointing to. In relation to broadband, I agree, we've obviously done quite a lot of work in mapping that. We talk with the planners about future sites in terms of their location and are they hooked in to the current network. I'm going to refer to Scott in terms of power.
Yeah, power has been identified as an issue for the site. It's one of the first requirements that businesses obviously look at, particularly those with the high power units. There has been a paper that's gone to board about future plan power requirements. There has been a conversation with National Grid about this. We're confident that we can get sufficient power to the remainder of the plots on phase 2. But it is a piece of work. It's on our risk register and it is something that we look at regularly.
It's worth adding that the sustainability team have done a piece of work with all the power providers, and obviously the digital team, when they came and reported, they identified the digital providers, that we've mapped as much of that capacity and where it is and where it's lacking and where it's, so we do kind of know that bit, and that enables, I suppose, future planning as we go forward.
Thank you.
Just put one more conversation piece, really. Well, thanks for that. I think it's worth the challenge, because obviously it's been such a success. And to carry on to Marcus's comments with regards to development, we've got a tremendous opportunity down that motorway stretch there for location, accessibility. So thanks for that. That was great. I'd just like to come back to Councillor Birch. Councillor Alan Amos was due to be here. Unfortunately, he did have a pre-existing appointment in Oxford, and we've spoken about this because I agree it's really important that the cabinet member responsible for this area is here. And to be honest, no one's more excited about the prospect of the growth hubs than Alan. Thank you very much.
I think you're going to say a pre-existing appointment in Cheltenham, but good, if only. Councillor Amar.
Thank you for this report. I've got quite a few questions. On page 11, you say management of significant risks and market updates. I'm interested to know what risks you speak of here. And then on page 12, the scheme was expected to create 5,000 jobs, yet it only created 800 to 1,000. So I am wondering who came up with this expectation of 5,000 jobs. I'll start with those two.
Yeah, if I start with the risks question, we've already talked about the infrastructure and the need to get power onto the site to make those remaining plots as attractive as possible. I think traffic congestion remains a risk. The more units that occupy the site, the busier the roundabout at Junction 6, which can be difficult at peak time. They're conversations that we have with our highways department, the conversations we have during the board meetings. Significant improvements have been done on that roundabout, extension of lanes and widening to ease pressures. There are obviously a number of mapping and sort of logistical plans, I guess, about how much traffic that can handle. And that does have an impact on potential occupiers, on those that have like large vehicle movements would be a more difficult one to get through the planning process because the traffic is an issue. The job concerns, I'll let Gary pick up in a minute with the numbers, but that's largely the risks to the site at the moment.
Obviously, the other risk during this period has been, and I suppose this is where us not being the developer and being the landowner is quite useful, because actually, if you think about it, this site has gone across Brexit, COVID, financial and the financial challenges we're seeing now. You know, at the end of the day, these developments have got to be funded. So, you know, us just doing our bit around when there was government cash for a bit of off-site infrastructure, actually it's the developer risk and who's taking that and making these deals with these companies work. And so that is probably why we're ending up with a type and a size of company that we've got. In terms of the 5,000 jobs, like all these things, if you measure the land, push it through a formula and you get an answer. I think the reality is, over that 10 years, the type and the range and the way business works has changed quite a bit. And what we're finding is, obviously, we're attracting a certain type of business, but we're doing our best in terms of job density. But I think business has changed in the way that it operates. It used to be a stage where you'd have lots of people. Obviously, there's more mechanisation. You know, the unit that MyTech are taking, that brings 250. But if you look at a unit, perhaps with our more dense employers, so Bosch, Mazak and those guys, they're employing more numbers in the same amount of space. But those are rare and really hard to move, because once they're settled, they obviously sit next to their workforce. So I think we've done as well as we can, but yeah, in hindsight, probably putting that figure out there, which wasn't me, I'd add, around 5,000 jobs was probably a reflection, because it creates an expectation and it creates a measure that we probably were never going to achieve. Having said that, we haven't completed the site yet, so you know, we will keep that number of 1,000 will keep rising.
The final question. Unlike the chair, I've not had the background for 10 years, and so forgive me if this does sound a bit novice, but on point 14, page 13, you say that there remains 800,000 square feet available for development, and securing occupancy for these plots remains a priority. So my question is, if you can't secure occupancy, is this something that you would look at to sell, or it can't be sold?
It's not in our ownership,
Okay.
So it's not for us to sell. I think the relationship that we've had with a very willing and partnership-orientated landowner, the developer in terms of Stover, I think we've taken the best opportunities. The fact that we can probably look at other sites around the country and recognise actually they still remain either greenfields or brownfields and haven't got any development, I think is credit to the partnership and the way it's worked. So, you know, Stofords and the commercial agents are out there promoting the sites, and obviously it's quite it's an easier sell now when you go, actually, here's the list of people who are already here, how they're operating. A business owner, manager can come and look at the site and go, oh, actually, yeah, I could be part of this, and I can see where I can get my workforce from, and it's located near the motorway, so I can move my goods. Often, the challenge is really being the first one on. Often that can be quite a challenge. Once you've now got to the stage we've got to, I'd be quite confident over, obviously, a period of time, that we fill the site gradually, and obviously then the question comes, so what next? And I think that's where we do need Junction 7, Wychavon Town, and other elements of the planning system to kind of start allocating those other sites. I think whether we've got the same relationship with those sites is probably the bit that I hinted at earlier.
Councillor Birch, were you indicating again? Yeah, and then Councillor Bells, then Councillor Allen. We'll go that way.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Just on the jobs thing, it's not my main point, but I do think it's always tricky when we put job estimates on developments like this, because you don't know who the tenants are. And I mentioned MyTech, and obviously MyTech being a tech firm, well, they don't actually employ many people on the site itself, but have a huge unit and contribute a huge level of business rates. So they're very valuable for us to have, but from a jobs perspective, don't necessarily create the same job creation that an industrial warehouse might do on a standard rate. But my main point was around, we do appear to have bucked the trend nationally. As we say, energy prices are soaring, employment costs are rising astronomically with the increases in national insurance contributions and national minimum wage. For businesses of this scale, large units, it is becoming trickier and trickier to find countries willing to do it in the United Kingdom, to find companies willing to do it in the United Kingdom. One of the examples on the business park is Kimmel. They had an office in Bromsgrove. They have now opened a second office on the business park, and continuing to grow in the health sector. So there are some clear success stories locally, and it does appear that Worcestershire are able to buck the trend. In your opinion, do you know why it is that we seem to be able to continue to attract such a high level of investment when other areas of the country are struggling so much?
There's a number of factors to that, and I think, again, back to that landowner flexibility, we've been able to offer freehold on the site, not just leasehold, and that's really important because businesses, particularly US owned and US backed, which MyTech are, they often want to own their own building and own their own bit. So there's a bit in the business culture that means we've been able to offer things that other sites haven't. Obviously, I would say, you know, our offer to the market in terms of Worcestershire is a great place to do business. We've got that skill support, the joined up nature of the team, the partnership between us and our district colleagues, planning and those kind of things. We make it as easy and as a red carpet treatment as we can, working with the developer. So once we've agreed, and once they've done their hard work of signing the companies up, then I think us as the public sector side do come around that. And I would say, you know, we are quite an attractive location because we're in the middle of the country. Now, we're not the only place that's in the middle of the country, but, you know, if you are moving goods 2 hours from here, you can get quite a distance, and that is quite important. And plus, I would say, but you know, the M5 is not as congested as other motorways, so you are taking yourself slightly out of congestion. We do have a good staff and skill base in terms of within the population, and therefore there is an attractive story to tell there. But nevertheless, landing these companies is a trick in itself, because at the end of the day, it's about their financial backing.
Councillor Bales.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just a quick question and clarification really on page 12 under financial return for ourselves here. Initial investment, the council guarantee your return on land receipts, and I notice we've got 1.5 million in that coming in. Again, with the financial model, like Councillor Marr, new to all this, what basically is a financial model, but more importantly, any other returns on the investment? I know we'll get business rates, but that goes to the district or the city council, so we as a county get nothing from that. So what other investments are there which we can shout about? Thank you. Sorry, returns, yeah.
Yeah, the 6.5 million investment that's mentioned in the report funded what's called an infrastructure fund. So both for phase 1, 4 million, phase 2, 2.5 million is what the county council sort of put up front, if you like. For phase 1, there was contributions from Worcester City and Wychavon, and for phase 2, there was a contribution from Wychavon alone. When a plot is sold and a plot of land is developed, obviously the price of that land, the value of that land increases. And depending on the acreage of the unit that's going to go on there, that determines how much of a return the council's seen, which is the £8 million, councillor, that you're seeing in the report. As Gary mentioned, and as the report shows, there is still 800,000 square foot undeveloped on the site, all of which will warrant a return when those plots of land are sold. So And well, that's part of the agreement, absolutely. So when those plots get sold, we still get a cut of that sale price along with Spetchley and Stoke and Wychavon. So that £8 million is where we are at the moment, but again, with all that 800,000 still to be developed, that number's just going to continue to rise as plots get sold.
A follow on, obviously, Chair, because that brings us on to the second phase. Presumably, we've got an investment of capital within that because we've presumably bought it with them. How much is that, and are we losing money on that, on interest rates or whatever? Just a...
Do you want that? No. Yeah, as I say, the 6.5, so 4 million was for phase 1, 2.5 was for phase 2. Yeah. Okay.
Councillor Allen.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'm also looking at page 12. You were talking earlier about the jobs and types of jobs, and you were pleased that it was HQs going in and finance people and stuff like that. Have we started considering what's going to happen as AI ramps up? How many jobs are likely to be lost? And I think that's something we in Worcestershire need to be vitally aware of, because it's coming very quickly, and a lot of white-collar jobs are going to go. I wish they weren't. I don't think it's a good thing, but it's obviously the way it's going to go. The bottom line for businesses is if they can get rid of people and make more money, I'm afraid that's the nature of businesses, especially big businesses.
On the AI point, it's been interesting talking to a number of our companies probably since the turn of the year, because I suppose we've been doing workshops or presenting kind of our AI options and, this thing around start to adopt because of your productivity. And certainly one company quoted that they'd received about 70,000 of orders last financial year. And then like this calendar year, they're expecting that to go tenfold to about 700,000 already. And I think, so there is a definite move towards this. Does it cost jobs or does it change the work? I think is still to be determined. But I think that, and what you will probably see is that those headquarter elements are still really important, because often the strategy gets defined there. If you're a outside plant, you tend to get done too. If you're the headquarters, you tend to be designing the strategy. So what's hoped is that, yes, the jobs is likely to change, but actually that creates new jobs and new different ways of doing things. I think the productivity challenge is not just for UK economy, but also for Worcestershire. So how we, and I suppose this comes back to the Growth Hub and what offers they put out there, how do we start our businesses working on that? And it's a challenge probably for the councils in terms of how do we do it, because there are some risks. Not all is known, but also how do you get that greater productivity is a challenge within the AI arena. So although I probably agree it's coming fast, I think the rate of change is probably not as quick as we think, but over 5-10 years I think we might see different jobs rather than the same.
Sorry, Chair, can I just add on the jobs? The 800 to 1,000 are the jobs that we can quantify, so they come from the people that are on the site. There's all the knock-on of the supply chain in the local economy that we can't quantify. The construction, maintenance, cleaning, facilities, IT support, telecoms, people that produce boxes and packaging, the person who drives up and delivers the sandwiches at lunchtime. They're all the things that we can't quantify outside of those 1,000 jobs. So I think it's just worth just keeping that in mind. Thanks.
Good. Any other comments or questions? No. In which case, we've given that a very good airing. Just turning to the concluding paragraph, as we always do at paragraph 16, to agree any comments to the Cabinet member, and indeed determine whether we'd require any further information on a specific issue or topic in this area, or indeed whether we want to invite Gary back to talk about Worcester 7 in a year or so's time. Would that give you long enough to develop Worcester 7, do you think, Gary?
Might need a bit longer.
These planning processes do take their time. Good. No, in all seriousness, I can't think of anything that we, but obviously, you're here regularly, and if there's anything that the panel want to specifically scrutinise, then we can, of course, invite you back. Thank you, Scott, and you're free to go should you so wish. Are you staying, Gary, for the last item?
Yeah, I'm staying for performance.
Yeah,
and
sure.
Any financial questions that come the service way rather than Sarah's capable.
Fine.
finance
Okay.
questions.
Chair, can I just request a 2-minute break, if possible, please?
Well, I'll be charitable and give you 5. Okay, should we just have a 5-minute comfort break? But we will start promptly in 5 minutes. Sam's just starting the webcast, so we'll reconvene the meeting, and we're on agenda item 6, performance and 2025-26 in-year budget monitoring, which starts on page 15. Welcome to Dave and Sarah, as always, and I'll hand over to you for presentation first of all.
I'll go into bat first, Chair, for me. Morning, panel. And my opening spiel, really, Chair, is just a little bit, obviously, the printed set of papers. It's page 17 is the start of the performance report. But it's replicated in a more interrogatable format, I think, in the Power BI format that's made available on the County Council's Our Performance website. And apologies to the members of this panel who would have heard this little spiel on Wednesday, but what we've done, Chair, with that is expanded it slightly, so there's now also Power BI reports, not just for the economy panel and the corporate and communities one, which have been there for a while, but one of my colleagues on adult social care team, they're going to ensure now as well that the adult care and wellbeing Power BI report will be on there as well. So that's accessible to all members and, of course, to members of the public as well, along with audit and governance, risk and performance reports. So trying to get things as easily accessible in a nice format, but also transparent. In terms of the report, it covers up to the end of the third quarter of this financial year. Now, I appreciate, in fact, that for several of the graphs and the tables in the report, it's a once-in-a-year update. And with impeccable timing, I think here in November for the last performance update, and there were a couple of data sets that were due to be updated around that time, and they updated right at the end of November. So the main one really, which there's a couple of graphs beforehand on page, I think it's page 18, 19 around business survival rates, but the more detailed tables around that pages 28 to 30, and it gives a lot of information there about the latest business survival rates, which, although the data was published in November last year from Office for National Statistics, it relates to businesses that were still trading in 2024 and looks back at when, you know, all the formation dates of when they were founded, were they still trading if they were founded in 2023, 2022 and so on. So there's the usual set of tables updated there, and just as Gary's alluded to before, I think in meetings, we've still, it's working through the data because time's moving on, but we've still got an anomaly in Worcestershire's data, particularly around Bromsgrove and their 3, 4 and 5 year survival rates, and also some of the Wyre Forest ones, because of the plethora of very short-term registrations. We've looked at whether we can, in fact, if anything in the Office for National Statistics data sets enable us to take those out. It doesn't give us enough data, enough detail, the granular detail, to be able to do that. So we've got several years figures where, for example, Bromsgroves look very low. And it's really to do with, I know we've talked about it at previous panel meetings, but it's really the very short-term registration, single employee businesses registered for maybe very short-term projects. I think as well there's also even been an element of reference made in some reports ONS have published, where it's people almost testing the market, and that could be with regards as well to very competitive areas where I think nationally, for example, in courier firms there's a relatively low survival rate, and that might be an element here as well. So in a sense I'd say that with regards to the business survival rate, it's the last couple of years, it's almost the ones where we're looking at the businesses started a couple of years before 2024 and still trading in 24, and the single year survival rates, which is frustrating, I accept. But with those, what you see then is that a lot of the district figures, including for Bromsgrove, for example, and the county as a whole, the figures are much more in keeping with the national trends. In fact, very encouraging in a way because of how we compare with some of the national rates of survival. Whereas, of course, some of the earlier figures, you think Worcestershire and some of the districts, oh my goodness, you know, the figures are much lower, the percentage. So I think we have to bite the bullet on it to a degree. It is a helpful data set, but at the moment I think the most useful elements of it are the two tables that relate to businesses over 1 and 2 year survival rates. The other, it's just as a quick sort of highlight package, as it were, Chair, was the working age adults, the employment there. The ONS data set, there's a table that's on page 30 and the printed pack goes over to page 31. And that still refers to 16 to 64s. But what we've always hoped is that Worcestershire's percentage would be above the England percentage. It invariably is, which is good. But actually the percentage point gap has grown as well. So at the end of September, the difference between Worcestershire's and the England percentage, that was at 1.84 percentage points, and it's grown a little bit. By the end of December, that had increased to 2.61, so 78.31 of Worcestershire's 16 to 64s in employment, 75.7 for England. The claimant count information, it's very detailed, of course, goes into it by age groups and also by district councils in the tables there. And it's basically, to summarise the more up-to-date figures, the tail of the tape there is really three up and three down. So we've got three of the districts where the December figure was higher, the number of claimants. A couple of in Malvern Hills, it was literally, according to the ONS data, it's five extra claimants. The Bromsgrove one was up by 50, it's a 3.4% increase. Wychavon's by 35 claimants, that's 1.7% increase. Of the other three, with the not deterioration, improvement, because their figure has gone down. There's Worcester City, 75 fewer claimants, a 3.2% drop compared with September. Wyre Forest is 25 fewer, it's 1.3% drop. Redditch, 5 less claimants overall. So there's a lot of historical data there, and Chair, it's always the case, and we've done, and colleagues who are members of the Environment Panel will know that we've had a review with the chair of that panel to perhaps pare things down, and if the panel here felt that perhaps we've got enough historical data, we don't need to go back as far as we do in some of these tables, more than happy to pare it back a bit. But we do still tend to think a lot in terms of pre and post COVID, don't we, as well as pre and post war. And a lot of this does look back to the pre-COVID and immediately after COVID period. The other data set that was updated is since the previous meeting is always an interesting one. I think it's one that perhaps we haven't got a huge amount of influence over, but the Office for Rail and Road, the station usage statistics, that was updated right at the end of November, and the figures for that, for all the station usage nationally, it's mostly done through ticketing information. There will be some spot checks in terms of the odd short-term visitor counting of exits and entries into stations, but that's the main source of the data is ticket sales. So the estimated figures, although they're quite detailed, and what it shows there is, again, with that reference to the pre and post COVID periods, that nationally across Great Britain, 99.4% is the level at which the number of rail journeys is at in 24/5 compared with 1920. Worcestershire's figure is a little bit below that overall. I jotted it down earlier on, but the 24/5 figure, I think it's about 95%, 95% of the 1920 figure. So we're a little bit lower. But as hopefully you can see from the table, there are several of the stations in the county that are actually bulk that trend, in the sense that they're actually showing improvements and increase in journeys made compared with 1920. And Worcestershire is also bucks the trend in the sense that overall the increase in Worcestershire's figures in 24/5 compared with 3/4, that's greater than the national level. So Worcestershire's figure, we saw an increase of 11.3% in 24/5 compared with the previous year. There were about nearly 8,800,000 journeys from the stations in Worcestershire in 24/5. Nationally, the Great Britain figure was much closer to 7% increase. So we're showing now we're quickening the pace of the increase and above the national level. The other indicators that have updated quarterly, they're indications, those indicators have been updated for the report, but I wouldn't say that there's anything major to flag up on those. Happy to try and take any questions if you've got particularly any of the data quality concerns or anything like that, and obviously to defer to Gary's expertise in other areas.
Thank you, Dave. Comments, questions? Alan, Councillor Bowles.
Thank you, Chair. Always a question. Thanks for that. And, you know I love statistics and graphs and everything. It's just really follow on from the very first item regarding business survival rates. And I noticed that we have highlighted the fact that survival rates for businesses trading 5 years or later for Bromsgrove is 4.1%. And I think, well, joking aside, it's not all couriers, I'm sure, but I know what you mean. Exactly right. Is that a really worrying trend? And is there anything we can be doing to try to get that up? And it is quite worrying to me to see that we are down at 4.1% with survival rate. Because when we look at the 3 year, it's healthy and it's high. It's better than, everyone else. But suddenly we have this massive dip. Can we try to get our heads around it and try to get some real reasoning behind it and what we can be doing here as councillors and as district councillors to try to get that up, because that is quite worrying for me, certainly, to see that figure. And I've got one more query after we come back on that.
Certainly, I think that the main reason for the collapse is that statistical, I was going to say anomaly, but that weakness in the data set. And what's frustrating, Councillor, is the fact that we can't, from my purely statistical point of view, I can't get at the figures that would actually say, if we took out of the equation those very short-term registrations, what would the figure be? Because the frustration with that is clearly the figure might still be quite low. I would be nowhere near as bad as the 4.1%, but therein I think is a real frustration, because you're right, would there still then be the need for us to question it from the statistical point of view, and could I go away and do some more research on it in terms of what the actions are that we could do to that, then whether it's something that to defer to Gary on that.
I think it does come back to the business support and how that's then structured of when you start up and how you run through. But I think Dave's kind of a description that this is still the statistics working their way through. I think we should probably take some comfort in the 1 year and the 3 year. And I think that then you layer over the 3 year, which is obviously COVID. So lots of people started in COVID. So I'm not surprised we see a bit of a sort of funny picture. So at this stage, I think it's pretty good and we're above the national average, and I think that's good news for Worcestershire.
Thank you.
You've got one more question, Councillor Bowles?
Yeah, well, just a comment on, and thank you for that, and just we need to keep an eye on it. Is there anything we can do as district councillors to try to encourage that through our own district? So, but just going on to my pet subject here, and that's rail journeys, station usage. Just on Old Church, we just 90% of it, and it's going back to what I've raised here constantly within this, that we do have accessibility issues, which is keeping that figure down. We have a car park which is flooded, which I've now got drained, but we've got potholes and cars don't really want to park in there. They can't park on street, so we're getting suppressed demand there. Also, we've got continually the problem with accessibility to our northbound platform. The lifts constantly don't work, and we've requested at the last meeting here that we actually look at it. I'm getting some response from Network Rail, West Midlands Trains and the County Council's partnerships to put it right, and I've given a plan to how we can do it, but it just seems to be extremely slow in coming forward, and we owe it to our residents to try to get them, giving them accessibility to a station, which is what we're here to do. And just my disappointment at that we're still not doing that, and moving fast enough to bring that forward. and both car parks and the lifts are a major problem where we are, and I suspect that is creating a suppressed demand at the station. So just my gripe as usual, Chair, at that.
Gary, do you want to respond on what the County Council are doing in respect to that in terms of with Network Rail?
Yeah, so colleagues have been working with Network Rail and West Midlands. I have a feeling that some work started. I'll contact a colleague and come back and update Councillor Bales on progress of where we're at.
Good, he's going to keep a track of that. So, right, we'll move on to Councillor Allen and then go to Councillor Birch.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Gary. Right, so looking at page 21, gigabit broadband coverage, I see we're slightly behind, not much, the UK average. What are we doing to try and close the last, is it sort of 9% or something like that? What we're trying to do to reach 100% or as close as we can to?
So good news. So obviously during the superfast era and that era, we had a number of contracts where we were guiding, I suppose, Openreach and other private providers to provide superfast. And like always, you get to the end of that, and then there's a new technology that means you have to go again. We're now working with BD UK. They won, Openreach won the contract for Worcestershire, and contacting a colleague and speaking to a colleague who speaks with Openreach yesterday, he said that they've actually started that. So that Openreach contract is for a further 22,000 premises. We're seeing that start to roll out across the county. So we continue to work through that. We also got some return and payback where in those early contracts, we could identify if areas that market started to deliver, then we'd get our money back. We will look to reinvest that once we understand where that gigabit strategy has kind of filled some of the, let's call them white not spot areas. We've done things like vouchers in before and looking at different technologies, because it's not just, I suppose, line to the house anymore. I mean, that's obviously the ideal, but there are other technologies that can come in and deliver in particularly rural or areas that have got challenges with topography. So we're continuing to strive towards the target, and obviously the ambition overall into the 2030s is to get to 100%.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Come back. So you've just mentioned a figure of was it, sorry, how many was it? 5,000?
Further 22,000.
22,000. Sorry, yes. So how many properties would be left that aren't included in that 22,000?
I think that takes us from memory to still just over 90% coverage. So we've still got 10%. So probably about another, doing some rough maths in my head, about another 30,000 that we'd still got to reach.
Okay, thank you. So that's obviously, I mean, compared to the whole of Worcestershire, it's not a massive amount, but it is still quite large. What plans are there coming forward to connect up the remaining 30,000? Because then we can hopefully say, job done.
Yeah, so we'll continue to work with the government partners, private sector. We know that we've got other partners, whether Virgin or whether Airband and other private providers who are continuing to build out their networks. We will continue to point them to the areas that haven't got coverage. And like I said, we will also look at other technologies that can provide this, because it may be that last little bit, actually it's a different technology that delivers this rather than wire to the premise.
Just following on from that, if it, and I'm no expert in this area, but those 30,000 remainder properties, it's easier said than done, isn't it? Because we're a rural county. Yeah. They're going to be in the rural divisions and the rural locations, where of course the commercial providers such as BT Openreach ultimately are there to make a commercial profit, and they make that profit out the customers and signing up for their product really. So, and I've experienced that in my own division. To broker, but experience that, and I think that that will be the tough gig, won't it? Being able to secure these providers to put the commercial investment into what will be small hamlets, not even villages, small pockets of across the county. That will be the problem, won't it, Gary?
Yeah, what we tend to find, it's either those rural, often pockets, like you say, not necessarily a hamlet, but you've got sort of 6 houses get developed. Suddenly those 6 are not connected. It's also a surprising number of new builds that we see they build, and obviously the infrastructure is then to follow, and it doesn't necessarily come at the pace that the houses fill. So in some areas it's quite surprising, and you'd think, oh, actually, as part of a new build, surely we do that as a service. Doesn't always come quite as it should. So it's often that, and then there are pockets, particularly there, and then a link to poor mobile service, because they haven't got fibre. It then means the topography means that that's difficult. So it is a sort of hodgepodge of a map, really, and it becomes quite tricky to kind of fill that. But that's where I think we will need public sector support and continue to lobby government to kind of help private providers fill that last. And 30,000 sounds quite a lot, but when you splatter them across the rural county that we've got, it is going to be a bit of a challenge, but nevertheless an ambition that we hold.
Good. Councillor Marr.
Thank you, Chair. I'm really very concerned about the working age adults in employment figure. I know that there's an average. I really don't like averages because the UK is, England's very diverse. The South East is very different to the West Midlands, and obviously here in Worcestershire, for example, we do have higher than average education rates. So when I look at this and seeing that in September we had 81% of adults, working age adults in employment, and now that's decreased to 79%. It's something we should be worried about, should we not? I don't know. The news this morning said that the growth in the economy was 0 in January of 2026. So I think there's more pain to be coming our way, and I wonder what measures it's a small, we're in the grand scheme of things and in government policy, etc. There are limitations to what we can do and can't do. And but I do think this needs sort of really very, very focused attention. It is a huge concern for me. Thank you.
So I'll start with what we're doing, and then I'll come back to the numbers, because we're not quite sure on the numbers, but I'll come back to that. So in terms of what we're doing, Connect to Work, which is a national programme, is kicked off, and we're starting to bring those people who've been on long-term sickness back into the world of work, working with DWP and our team in terms of employability support, and then contractors that you identified like CTEC, so they're identifying the jobs and then moving people into those. Our youth hubs, we definitely think have had an impact in Worcester, and it's starting to have an impact in Redditch in terms of, although the numbers continue to rise, actually we think we're taking the top off that, and for every young person who comes through the youth hub, for every 2 people who come through the youth hub, we're placing 1 in a job. So that's quite an achievement at this point in the economy. There's no doubt there is headwinds in relation to the macro economy and how that's going to happen. So we are kind of working around those kind of bits and other bits of government policy around skills boot camps, which are, if somebody thinks that actually they can try a new and want to learn and go on the training course, there's a job opportunity at the end of those boot camps, and we're running a number of sectors, back to the sectors that Luke referenced, in construction, manufacturing, defence IT, health and care, welding. So we are really responding to kind of where the job needs and requirements are coming up. And in order to do that, we did look at the figure that had dropped, and the sort of 17,500 we've questioned, and we've questioned with Dave, and I don't know whether he wants to comment about sometimes we get revisions, because we think actually this is we would notice that not just in the unemployment figures, we'd notice that in the job market, and we haven't really seen that. So I think at the moment, although it's a reportable figure, we've sort of questioned that, but at this stage we're having to take that at face value. But our experience says if it was that number coming out of the jobs market, we would get we would notice the impact. But I don't know if Dave wants to comment about revisions to some of these figures and how they happen.
Yeah, there are periodically revisions that are done. I'm just looking actually on the information to see whether ONS and NOMIS, where we get the information from, if there's anything recent that they've done, but there isn't. It's one of these ones as well, I think, is a overarching headline report, where the figures are done. And I think the problem is that certainly at the national level and even some of the regional figures, I take on board your point, Councillor, in fact, is it worth including those and using them as a comparator because it's such a diverse area that you're looking at. In terms of Worcestershire's, Gary's right, that it's probably better to be going with any data set that we can use where in actual fact it's got almost the frontline knowledge and experience that's coming through, information that Gary and his team is looking at, whereas this is almost as though it's one of those very far removed data sets that's looking at just coming up with a single percentage, an all-encompassing one. It should be right. It's based on obviously on the returns, PAYE returns, things like that from companies, but it can be subject to quite marked revisions, and the latest figure, sometimes they will say, there's a certain confidence level, should be around 95% of their confidence level of the figure, and they'll come back and say later on they have changed it. I have found it to change hugely. It might be certainly not one whole percentage point, but it might be something that we'd look at for this report to make use more of the information that perhaps Gary and the team have got. That I think sometimes it is one of these things where it's easy for me to go in and produce a report based on some of the returns, which are certainly accredited, ONS information, but actually, is it close enough to what our on-the-ground experience is?
Good. Any more questions? Councillor Birch, sorry, I forgot you, and then, sorry, apologies, you did indicate, and then Councillor Allen.
Thank you, Chairman. My question is around the broadband section. So we had a lengthier discussion around this last year at one of our meetings, and there it was raised about the fact of, under the last administration, one of the things that was done around broadband coverage was trackers were attached to find out where there were areas of low broadband. But one of the things that we did discuss then was around whether we could do something similar with our parks and open spaces, particularly because from a public safety point of view, as people walk through our parks, it's incredibly important that should an emergency arise, that they are able to phone, call, text, get in touch with somebody, whether that be for a medical or any other reasons, and whether we could work with our local towns and parish councils to get greenkeepers or something similar to when they're out with their ride-on mowers to do something similar in terms of tracking broadband coverage in those areas to see if we can improve it to make it slightly safer. Just wondering whether that was still a possibility. And then more generally on broadband from a planning perspective, obviously we do tend to get, it's quite contentious. I've had it down my own road where I live, where masts go up, and of course there has been an issue nationally with using underground technology, and it can be held up through a planning process, especially in our areas of natural beauty, so down towards Broadway and areas like that, and I'm sure in Malvern too, where telephone masts are not seen as very popular and they can be blocked through planning, which makes it slightly harder for broadband. Just wondering whether there's any work that's going on to try and address that issue further and ensure that, from our perspective, we are putting broadband in and ensuring that broadband can go in where it's available, and that we're not allowing those planning hurdles to necessarily stop residents being able to access faster broadband.
So first question around our parks, it's definitely doable. I'll take that away to the team and we'll have a conversation and come back in writing. On the second one, then yes, in terms of even broadband in some areas, that private sector providers are putting poles in that can be unpopular, seen as unsightly. However, our ability as either district and this is where it kind of crosses over a little bit into the district world or county, they do have sort of permitted development rights. Obviously, then in terms of masts and planning, those tend to go through the usual process. We've seen some accepted and some not. But we are also working with those communities where we know there is the white spots around mobile coverage, and we're seeing a number of antennae go in. So certainly around Hanley Swan recently, working with the church and the diocese, actually what we've seen is a small amount of equipment going in, which has actually then improved the coverage in that area. So I think at the moment we're quite nimble and quite fluid, but working with the communities is probably the way to kind of solve this problem, because yes, we recognise the sensitivity in some areas, but also the importance of mobile and broadband coverage in our rural communities.
Thanks, Gary. Councillor Allen.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Can we just look at page 31, please? Claimant count by district council and age group. I'm just really looking to try and understand why the numbers have significantly dropped in each case by about 1,000. Is there some sort of reason behind this that I'm not understanding?
No, there's no reason. It's one of those ones. The data set's always rounded up nearest sort of 5, so it comes out with those nice rounded figures, 20s and 5s. But no, Councillor, there isn't. It's one of those data sets that will be subject to certain seasonal variations. There's no, again, with this one, it tends to be a little bit of retrospective adjustment to it. With the most recent ones, periods of probably over a year being more likely to be readjusted, reassessed by ONS. But no, there isn't anything that's particularly been uniform across the piece. I think it does sometimes seem a bit too neat and tidy when you're dealing with the rounded up figures. But no, there's no obvious reason and nothing that was produced with the data set to say that we should be aware of anything. I think it may be reflective both of the current figures, but also some adjustments that were done by ONS to the more recent data. Actually, going back that far, Councillor, as well, I think they would still have included, it would have been universal credit, going back to with 2020. So I think from that, I'm just trying to think now what it was, that there were several changes that were going back to 2024, where the data set was reassessed and adjusted. But I think prior to that, there were all sorts of other types of claimants that could be included. So again, it is that case of, are they still comparing like with like? It's still treated as one data set, even though over the years, as I say, there've been changes with regards to universal credit. Again, it's whether we're actually now going back too far with the comparison. So that would be the certain one distinctive factor that's impacted on those figures. Because as you say, if you go back to 2020, then you're looking at figures that are way above the levels that they are now. But that's mainly to do with the various claimant counts, and types of claim that they've included in the data set.
Any other comments or questions on the data? No? In which case, shall we move on to the budget and Q3 monitoring? And Sarah, hand over to you for anything you want to say in opening.
Thank you, Chair. Apologies to you all, because you've probably all heard this numerous times now, and certainly Councillor Bales heard this on Wednesday, so apologies. This is obviously the financial position for Q3, so period 9, so to December. So obviously within the team we're working on figures for period 11, and we're certainly working towards financial year end now. So what I can report for this area is that there are no major concerns arising from the numbers. But what I will do is just quickly go through the headlines, and then you can ask me, because as I say, you've probably heard this all several times and probably tell me the numbers. And then you can ask any questions that you may have relating to this scrutiny panel. So the current financial position that we're reporting, so it's a Q3 one, is suggesting that there's an adverse movement of 2.2 million from the Q2 position. So we're now using 17.2 million pounds worth of reserves to balance. Originally the forecast was 415. We're also using 33.6 million pounds worth of exceptional financial support. So that leaves us in a position where the budget doesn't balance by 50 million, but we're bringing in funds in order to be able to balance that. You're all obviously aware that the financial challenge is considerable. And all areas, certainly areas within E&I, are working on areas that they can look at where the spend is. Do they need to be making that spend? Scrutinising vacancy appointments to ensure that they are definitely needed. So the pressures are coming from adult social care and children's social care, as you're aware, but these are being mitigated in some areas by forecast underspends. And certainly one of those underspends is in home to school transport and other areas within economy and infrastructure, and also the corporate areas are showing savings. This area had 1.9 overall. The economy and environment, I'm going to talk about them together because it's quite difficult to split, was 1.9 million. Of that, at Q3 we're reporting only £142,000 worth of that is amber. What I can say, as I say, we've been working towards year end, is that will all be green by the time we close down the accounts there, so there won't be any sort of outstanding savings for this scrutiny committee. Page 44 gives you the forecast reserves. As I've said, we're having to use 2.2 million, so now our actual unearmarked reserves are only £18 million. Again, this was shown up in the external audit report as an area of concern, that our unearmarked reserve balance is now so low. Just a little slide, page 45, on forecast high needs. Every Child Achieving and Thriving, it's the new schools white paper, has been published. And what that is saying is that they will cover 90% of the DSG deficit that's accrued up to March 26. So for us, the assumption is that our deficit will be £194 million. Although this is good news, there's still then that £20 million, that 10% that we're not aware of any funding coming forward, or there could be further announcements from central government. That 90% also is reliant on the fact that a plan is created that shows how we're going to tackle that deficit and try and bring that deficit down. Obviously, that will go to Children's Scrutiny Panel for their scrutiny. So the capital position, the capital programme will have grown. If you look back to Q2, it will have grown quite significantly. And that's because we've now been able to put in the announcement of the 3-year capital funding. As with revenue, we've had a 3-year capital announcement, so that allows you to plan a lot better. There are 2 pie charts there, one on 47, which shows you where the capital programme sits. Open for business sits there at 58 million, which is the area that the scrutiny panel looks at. The announcement of the new funding, the new 3-year funding, means that the programme now is more predicated towards government grants, and that the borrowing as a percentage has come down slightly. So items relevant to this panel, I'm going to give you the position for E&I, home school transport and skills. Obviously, not all areas in E&I are pertinent to this panel. But as I said, there's a 1 million underspend within E&I. Skills and investments will balance. There's a lot of grant funding coming through there, so we'll just balance off that as we work through the year. And then home school transport is now showing a £6 million saving. So the headlines there: waste management, £500,000 underspend because we've fallen into the higher tonnage bracket. As I said on Wednesday, we were concerned that we might fall below into the higher cost bracket. The latest figures are suggesting not, so we're not concerned about that now. Road lighting is around the LED rollout. Again, that's going to come to an end, so there won't be any further savings arising from there. If there are, they will be small. And then highways ops, that's an overspend there, and the majority of that is around vehicle maintenance and the age of the vehicles, certainly around gritters. So there's a little overview on home to school transport, again not pertinent to this panel, but what I will say is obviously there are factors, external factors now, that are not included within this budget. So the world around us is changing. We all know, if you've been to the petrol pump recently, that petrol oil prices, etc., are starting to increase. There is no reflection of that in these figures at the minute, nor is there any reflection of that in the 27-28 budget. So we will have to watch that very closely.
Thanks, Sarah. I'm sure you're happy to take any questions or comments. Councillor Edmonds was first.
Thank you for that. You're right, we've heard it before, but that was really well put in. Okay, there is a point that came out at a recent scrutiny panel, adult wellbeing, blah, 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 this week, and it covers the, in your slide there, it says covers 90% of the DSG deficit. Is it up to 90% or is it 90%?
It will be 90%, but again, as I say, that's on a proviso of that plan being created. So there needs to be a plan around how we're going to tackle, how we, Worcester County Council, are going to tackle that deficit moving forward.
So, to come back to the question then, so you're saying, obviously, I understand we have to put a plan in place. I know that's being done at the moment, but could that not be 90% then if the plan doesn't fulfil the expectation?
Yeah,
of the
absolutely.
government? So it's all dependent on the plan that we get the 90%?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you for answering that. Thank you.
And no doubt the Children's Scrutiny panel will be looking very keenly at that, Councillor Edmonds. Any questions to Sarah specific to this committee's area of work? No? Whoops. You've stunned everyone into silence. I suspect that's because we're budgeted out over the course of the... if that's not probably a very grammatically correct word, is it? Budgeted out, but we probably are. Unless you can find any extra cash, Sarah, then...
Obviously working hard on that.
Nick is, I'm sure he'll...
Yeah.
Good. Okay, well, thank you very much. That concludes that agenda item then. So our final item on the agenda is just to look at our work programme for 26-27. Our next meeting is on the 10th of June at 10 a.m. in this very room, as always. So, believe it or not, June will be here before we know it. And let's just go to the concluding pages. I think it's page 57, isn't it, of our agenda. We've got Malvern Hills Science Park, which we have requested previously. Would anybody else like to bring anything forward for that meeting? We've got role of the council encouraging development of commercial space. That's been ongoing a while, and we've got marketing communication of tourism within Worcestershire.
Yes.
We had that relatively recently, didn't we? 2 or 3 meetings ago.
Yeah. Chair, can I intervene?
Yes, you may.
This item is specifically about the marketing side of it. I don't know whether before I joined, did you scrutinise the marketing side of it, sort of the website, where are we marketing our touristic sort of sites, etc. It's very specific. What do you think, Gary?
Gary, I think we touched on it, but
we covered a fair bit of it as part of the annual update. I'm quite happy to bring the specifics back, but whether it's a meaty enough item, I think, is a question, and whether, perhaps if Sam says when tourism came, that, yeah. So if we could perhaps plan it into sort of back end of the year. Yeah, then you've got then an annual report.
Yeah, so that come in September, October, so not too long to wait, but probably bringing it back for the next meeting is probably a bit too soon. And you very helpfully said what specific information you want, Councillor Marr. So that's not lost on Gary to address those issues when it comes back in the autumn. Okay. Anything else for June? Councillor Allen.
Rural public transport?
Would that be us or would it be
Well, you need rural public transport to get people to their places of work.
I think that's the environment.
Pass that one over.
So you've got, well, a couple of things. So you've got here links between youth provision, apprenticeships and youth employment, which was requested on the 12th of December 2025. That would be a good one as we are finishing sort of GCSEs and A-levels, etc. Yeah.
Yeah, okay, we'll take that then. 'Cause we had a TBC date, so links between youth provision, apprenticeships and youth employment and Malvern Hill Science Park.
And if we could just remember to add direct foreign investment as an item for future.
Yes,
Thank you.
that's not lost on us. Sam's taken a careful one out, Councillor Amar. Good. Well, if that's sufficient, if there's nothing else, then at 12:14, thank you all very much for coming, and we'll formally close the meeting. See you all in June, albeit probably lots of other times before.